The Life and Times of Theodore Addison, 5th Grade Challenge by Jamaal. Tuesday, Part 2.
What is the meaning of this? Mr. Gibson shouted as he stood from his seat.
With a serious look on his face, Ted turned to him and said,
"If you knew all the stuff she did, you wouldn't be mad. You'd be saying she got what she deserved."
"No, you idiot!" a girl shouted from the back.
"Don't call me an idiot. You know what she did to James and Bookworm. She apologized to Bookworm, but said nothing to James."
"Yes, she did."
"When?"
"Just now. She passed a note to him saying she was sorry. I just read it."
"James just said he didn't get an apology." "It's because I have it," one boy said, holding up the note. "I was curious about what she said, so I started reading it too. But by the time I was ready to pass it on, it was too late."
Ted was shell-shocked as Mr. Gibson was helping the two girls off the floor. Fortunately uninjured, the boy finally delivered the note to James. It was a moot point, though, since the damage had already been done.
"This could have all been avoided if you had just passed the letter on instead of being nosy," Ted said, trying to deflect the blame. "No, Ted, this could have been avoided if you weren't bent on revenge," Mr. Gibson said. "For this disgraceful display, here is your score. For ingenuity, your score would have been 10 out of 10. Now, it is 0. For execution of the idea, your score would have been 10 out of 10. It's an amazing feat of engineering, but you'll get the credit you deserve at your Nobel Prize speech. For now, 0. And for the presentation of the idea, you would have gotten a 6 out of 10. But once again, now, you'll get 0. You single-handedly destroyed any chance of your team winning, no matter how well they perform today, assuming they even still want to present today after this. I hope you're happy." The boys were irate. Many of them started to boo at Ted, shout at him, and throw things like paper balls at him before Mr. Gibson pulled Ted behind him to shield him. After the volley of school items stopped, Mr. Gibson asked another teacher to take the two girls down to the office to get a change of clothes. "I can't, for the life of me, figure out why you all want to be so cruel to each other," he said. "After lunch, we all need to have a talk. It needs to be substantive and frank. For now, I just need to gather my thoughts." It was strange, Ted noticed, that Veronica didn't say anything during the entire episode. She didn't defend herself against his accusations or call him a mean name or try to kill him like she would have last week. And she actually did apologize to both Bookworm and James. He couldn't figure out why she bit her tongue when in the past she would have probably pulled some of his hair out of his head by now. From Veronica's vantage point, furious as she was too shocked to respond. As she started wiping herself off, she understood that her silence was golden. She'd done what she needed to do by writing James that apology note. But now that Ted was in trouble for his own childish actions, she'd not only teach him a lesson, but it'd also instantly garner the girls' support. By being the victim, she was the hero again, strangely. Then, if she retaliated against him, no one would blame her. After the girls got some dry clothes, the second time for Veronica in as many weeks, Mr. Gibson asked the students for all the details that led to that moment. It became something of a class trial. The students all began raising their hands, telling the story of Veronica manipulating Amber, setting her up with James, and using their romance to gain an unfair advantage, while also making Amber look like a co-conspirator.
They played the audio recording that had been circulating since yesterday and the pictures from that morning, where everyone seemed to be reconciling. Seeing the evidence and hearing the he said, she said back and forth gave Mr. Gibson a headache, though.
All right, I've heard enough. There's seemingly no end to all the drama between you. Ted, disqualification and a 1-day in-school suspension for spraying them with water. Veronica, detention after school for trying to cheat. I'm sick of this. Everybody go to lunch, cool off, and when we come back, we need to talk.
Ted and Veronica were surprised by their punishments. Ted knew that an in-school suspension wasn't as bad as out of school, but it would still go on his permanent record, which every school would see when they saw his name. Veronica, meanwhile, hated that she was getting punished for something she already made amends for. How was that fair? As the students filed out to lunch, Ted was grasping at straws, trying to figure out a way out of the trouble he was in. He saw James and wondered if he could serve as a character witness to maybe lighten his punishment. After all, that's who Ted was doing all this for.
I cannot, James said when asked. You did this against my counsel. I tried to tell you not to do anything to her. You chose to do this thing. If this was for me and only me, you would have listened to me.
With his plan thwarted, Ted decided to appeal directly to the teacher using his own rationale. Surely he would understand, since he was an adult and could understand Ted's advanced level of reasoning. But when he got back to the classroom, he saw the door was closed, and Veronica was pleading for a lighter punishment as well. The teacher spotted Ted through the small window and got up to open the door.
For the last time, he said as the door swung open, even if you apologize, the damage has been done, and it can't be erased, no matter how many times you say you're sorry. Maybe next time you'll think twice. Now go eat.
At a loss for words, Veronica stormed out of the room, looking at Ted as if she wanted to fight, then and there. She stopped, got in his face, and said, "The only reason I haven't gutted you like a fish is because I don't want to get suspended." Mr. Gibson was ready to break things up if another scuffle broke out. Veronica continued, "Tomorrow, I'm going to make sure you never cross me again." She stormed off, taking the opportunity to slam her fist into a locker on her way. Ted turned to enter the classroom and sat down in front of the teacher's desk, where Veronica had just been. Annoyed, the teacher fluffed his seat cushion and sat down. Hoping the teacher would lighten up, Ted said,
I know you're really mad about this. I'm not so much mad as I am disappointed. You know better than this, Ted. You're not some average kid, but you keep trying to act like one. So how about this? Let's drop the teacher-student dynamic and let's just talk like people. And before you ask, no, nothing you say is going to change your punishment. You honestly deserve this, Ted. Okay, make your case. Why am I wrong and you're right? Because Veronica's been at this since I first met her. She's always been this way. It's like she knows the lines not to cross, so she comes as close to the line as she can. And even if she gets caught, she just gets to play dumb and act like she shouldn't get in trouble. But she knows. She just chooses to do it so she can get her kicks. And we get humiliated, Ted said. That sounds a lot like you too. I mean, she pushes your buttons, you push her buttons, and you both, oh, forget it. She got detention after school today. Isn't that what you wanted? She got punished. No, what I mean is like, imagine if you were me, and you didn't believe the teachers would see what she did, or even if the teachers did see it, they wouldn't do anything to stop it from happening again. What would you do if you believed that, Mr. Gibson? The teacher didn't answer at first, since he himself had trouble thinking of how to resolve the issue. Ted continued. So, this time, she took it a step too far. After the academics contest was over, me and Derek tried to find James to talk to him, to help him. We couldn't find him. We were both worried he might have done something to, hurt himself. It's hard enough for him here as it is, and Veronica just did that to him, not thinking about what could have happened if his mind was in a different place.
Mr. Gibson could see the worry on Ted's face recounting the story. For all his self-assurance that this contest was going to smooth things out between the kids, it seemed to be more perilous than he thought. Worse, he had no idea this was bubbling under the surface. If Ted and Derek's inkling was right, he could have potentially lost one of his students yesterday, none the wiser to his struggles. Everything worked out in the end, but this was a near miss he didn't want to see happen again.
I needed to do something to both avenge him and make Veronica know how it feels to be humiliated. Hopefully she wouldn't do it again, but now it seems like she really wants to get me back for this, so who knows what I may need to do next. But whatever it is, I'll do it to protect my friends, and I'll accept whatever punishments I have to. And that's where your problem lies. You were doing good at first when you said you were concerned for James. Then you messed up with your response. Think about this. Does retaliation create conditions for peace? How do you bridge that gap? Well, Ted started, if she realizes she was wrong and changes, wouldn't that be the goal? It seems like she was starting to do that this morning. You had an off-ramp, but you just couldn't resist another dig at her, could you? So now, you're right back where you were a week ago. And for what? You two have been fighting like cats and dogs since you met, as you said, and what has that gotten you? Today, it made your classmates angry at you, got you an in-school suspension, and it made you look like a jerk. I imagine someone with a 130 IQ would aim for a better result than this.
Ted stared at the floor, trying to find fault with his teacher's statement, but couldn't.
Well, if she had apologized sooner, I wouldn't have done that at all. And that's your problem. You keep letting your actions be determined by someone else. It's like you're a robot and all she has to do is key in a command and off you go. Why don't you ever exercise some self-control? Listen, we don't have much more time for lunch, and I don't know about you, but I need to eat. My challenge to you is this. You're not an average kid, so don't let your marker of success be the same as the average kid. Forget about the results of the competition and find another off-ramp with her. Build one if you have to. Winning the competition won't impress me. Making peace with her, that would impress me.
Mr. Gibson didn't wait for Ted to answer. He got up and opened the door for Ted to head out. As Ted walked out the door, an idea struck him.
Hey, what if you gave me after-school detention? I could talk with her then. There's no talking in detention. Besides, the in-school suspension is what you deserve.
With that, the teacher closed the door, leaving Ted outside to figure out what he could do to make amends and try to avoid more trouble. Without a doubt, his parents would find out. And almost certainly, the boys hated him. He would have to walk into the lunchroom to a loud round of boos, and might even have to watch out for food being thrown at him. Maybe it was better to sit this one out. Hungry as he was, he decided to go to the school library and wait for the bell. When he arrived, though, he found James and Amber sitting at a table together, their backs turned to him. When he greeted them and asked why they were in the library, James told him they tried to eat together, but they were the talk of the grade and couldn't get any privacy.
We snuck out one by one and met up here,
Amber added.
No one knows where we are, at least for now. I don't know how long this attention is going to last, but I hope it's over soon.
Hey, Bookworm, what was it like when Veronica apologized to you? What did she say and do? Ted asked.
Oh, she just stood there, watching me at first. It was kind of weird, but then she said she wanted to start over with me and gave me a hug when I forgave her. She was crying. I could tell she was sincere.
And James, what did she write in her note? I actually did not read the note, James said. It is on my desk still.
Am I correct to think you're looking for a way to make things right with her? Amber asked.
Ted nodded his head, saying, if I can figure out how she apologizes, maybe if I do it the same way as her, or something close to it, that could bring real peace. Get what I mean? And I think I have an idea how to do it.
Later, as the students returned to class, the boys were scowling at Ted, while Veronica was surrounded by her crew again. She and Brittany were both back in their normal clothes, now dried. Ted was, again, relegated to the table along the back wall. Mr. Gibson started off his conversation with the class by first writing the word self-efficacy on the board. Then he said,
Hey guys, remember that time you all had that food fight in the cafeteria around Valentine's Day? Do you remember what the punishment was for it?
He waited for anyone to raise their hand and answer, but no one wanted to, though everyone did remember the punishment.
The punishment was that you all had to write apology letters to the custodians who had to clean it up. But do any of you remember what they had to deal with cleaning it all up?
Again, silence from the class.
Here's what Mr. Ramsey said, since you all say how much you love him. He said he had to miss his daughter's birthday celebration because he had to stay late cleaning up. Miss Stinson had a backache after all the cleaning and scrubbing and had to take 2 days off, losing pay. And all you had to do was write apology letters for that. That won't make up for the money she lost or the time he missed with his daughter. And after all that, who can really say that another food fight like that wouldn't happen again?
Again, there was silence.
This seems to be fun and games, but you're not really thinking about how your actions impact those around you. You're old enough now to understand that you really do have a choice whether you want to be a good person or a jerk. And it's not like you're babies that might hit someone and it wouldn't hurt. You're capable now and you can do enormous damage. So we need to talk about real consequences that actually prevent stuff like this from happening again.
Now the students were getting nervous. How much worse would the punishments be from now on? Derek pictured being forced to hold buckets of water or dictionaries from outstretched arms. Diamond pictured endless math homework. Ted pictured month-long suspensions. For James, that would be a good thing.
Essays and homework and apology letters don't really connect with the direct incident. I'm not saying we need to go to an eye for an eye system, but the punishment needs to have some connection with the crime. If you insult someone's family, you actually have to call and apologize to their family. Or if you hurt someone, you have to pay for their bandages. Or if you hurt someone's feelings, you'll have to spend the next day publicly praising that person. Does that connect better?
None of the students responded, and it was obvious they hated the idea. Veronica then stood up and asked, "So, when Ted put that paint on my chair, are you saying I should get to put paint on him?"
Not quite, but maybe instead you would have to hand wash them and dry them, Mr. Gibson said. Well, when Veronica threw water balloons filled with ice at me, what about then? Ted asked, also standing up. You two are already on thin ice as it is. How about you just treat each other right? Then you wouldn't need to worry about punishments.
After the lecture, Mr. Gibson sent Ted to the main office to serve his in-school suspension, while the rest of the contest resumed. In the office, Ted had to sit in the waiting room while his parents were called. Naturally, when Mr. Addison heard that his son had gotten into more trouble today, he was angry, but at the same time, he was tired of dealing with this issue.
Son, I'm not having a good day right now. And then you add this to it. I just don't know how to deal with it. Dad, I know. I was wrong. I'm gonna try to fix it, but I just haven't had the chance yet. Please, let me handle this. Cool. Results.
Click. Mr. Addison hung up. Ted could tell he couldn't afford any more trouble at school or with his parents. He sat there for hours, racking his brain, looking for a gesture that might soften Veronica's mood. He kicked himself for blowing up his only chance at peace. But he also couldn't help but feel like Veronica deserved that water cannon.
How many times did you deserve punishment and didn't get it? A thought came.
It was strange to think that. It wasn't something he'd normally think, but it hit him square in the heart. Then, to his mind came his family's morning devotional, Romans 5, verse 7 to 8. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person. Maybe for a good person, someone might dare to die, but God demonstrates His love for us this way. Even while we are still sinners, Christ died for us. As he started to feel guilty, another verse crept into his mind. This time, 1 John 1, verse 9. If we confess our sins, He is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Rather than sulk, Ted spent some time praying, telling God everything he did wrong, hoping he could fix things.
Just another chance, God. Just another chance, he repeated.
When the final bell rang and the students gathered their belongings to leave, Ted was free to go, but had to get his reinstatement letter signed by a parent. Tucking the letter into his backpack, he first went to find Matthew and brought him along to find Derek. As the students were emptying their lockers and heading home, Ted asked Derek what happened in the competition. Derek told him.
Anthony and Robin killed it. At first, they were going to do different music performances, but since they were supposed to go back to back, they came together and gave a concert in class, Ant on the drums and Rob on the guitar. It was really good, like, I'd have paid money for that. Go on, Ted said. They got perfect scores. Didn't matter, though, since, well, you know. And now all the guys hate me. Well, some do, but others were kind of glad you got Veronica good. I mean, that was something. We even got it on camera. It's a meme now.
Derek started to show Ted the video of the moment Veronica's face was engulfed by the water, but Ted pushed it away.
I actually feel kind of bad about that. Don't. She had it coming. Frankly, the only reason the guys are mad at you is because the whole team lost points, but ain't nobody acting like she was some angel. I think I made a big mistake. Hey, would you do me a favor and drop Matt off? I need to stay behind.
Ted left Matt with Derek and went down to the lunchroom where the detained students were. As he opened the door, he spotted Veronica by the window, staring aimlessly outside.
Detention slip?
A bored teacher asked, looking like he wanted to fall asleep.
I don't have one,
Ted answered, a bit too loud for the room, grabbing the 24 students' attention. Veronica turned to him and rolled her eyes.
You can't be in here without a detention slip. This isn't a place to socialize, the teacher said. But it's important. Can you give me 2 minutes to talk to somebody? Then I'll go. The teacher sighed and agreed.
so Ted approached Veronica on the far side of the room. Each student had a table to themselves and was at least 10 feet apart. As Ted made his way over to her, she looked around, wondering where he would sit. But as he got closer to her, she realized he was coming to her seat.
"One person to a table, Addison. Get lost," she whispered loudly.
"I'm not here for detention. I just came to say sorry,"
Ted whispered back as he sat next to her.
"This is so embarrassing. Everyone's looking at us. Get out of here."
"Okay, I'll go, but I just wanted to say sorry, okay? Are we cool?"
"Heck no," she said for everyone to hear.
"Shh! Just tell me what you want me to do, okay? I'm trying to make it up to you."
"You want to make it up to me? Invent a time machine and go back and undo what you did," Veronica said.
"All right, you two, you're making a scene. Young man, you have to go," the teacher said.
Ted tried to ask the teacher for more time, but he wouldn't listen. He put Ted out of the lunchroom as the other students snickered and immediately shushed them when the door swung closed. Veronica was embarrassed even more. If she didn't know him, she would have thought he was staging that scene to humiliate her even more. To take her mind off the issue, she looked out the window and daydreamed, counting down the time until she would be free to leave. Ted's gamble didn't work, but he had one more trick up his sleeve. He sat down on the floor outside the lunchroom and waited the full hour until detention was over. While he waited, he checked the updates from the other classrooms. It seemed the boys closed the gap a bit with the girls. Yesterday, it was 10-5 girls. Today, it was 14-11, with the girls still leading, but tomorrow was the boys' big chance to take the overall win. Some students complained that the teachers graded the boys too highly, but others said the boys were graded too harshly. In all honesty, the matches were tight again, and the boys were lucky to take 3 wins. That, of course, led to angry messages about how Ted cost them a chance to take the lead that day.
"What's it all for?"
Ted asked as he turned off his smartwatch. The whole issue felt empty to him now. While Ted was waiting for detention to finish, Amber and James left the school separately and got on different public buses. The attention showed no signs of dying down, so the two planned to meet at Archie's again to truly connect with one another, away from prying eyes. Amber arrived first and waited for James. When he got to Oracle Park, he found that he took the bus that put him at the other end of the park, so he had to walk the entire way back, about a 10-minute walk. Amber waved him down, still wearing the rainbow dress he admired so much. From a distance, he really got to appreciate her beauty, and she seemed to have only brought it out for him. They went inside to order another meal that James didn't have the heart to tell her he hated. But maybe next time he would invite her to his favorite kosher restaurant, get her hooked on something, and hopefully never have to set foot in Archie's again. As they sat down with their food, James told Amber he wrote her a note. She also wrote him a note, so they could decide who should read theirs first. They decided to play rock, paper, scissors to choose who would go first. With their hands behind their backs, they chanted,
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot!
And Amber threw the paper ball square in James's face.
Gotcha! Finally,
she said. James looked at her with a confused expression, and she explained.
Last time I threw paper at you, I missed by a mile. Open it up and read it.
Saying he didn't really have a choice, he unfurled the paper and read its contents. On the inside, it had the words, I love you, written again and again into a heart pattern. James was shocked to read that she loved him, since that was much stronger than just liking someone. He hadn't known what he'd done to make her say she loved him, but he was overjoyed nonetheless. After the shock of her letter wore off, James presented his letter to Amber. In it he wrote,
Dear Ambrosa, I really like your full name. It is very pretty.
Aw, thanks,
Amber said, blushing.
My name is not really James. It is Yaakov. It is the Hebrew version of the name Jacob. The name James comes from the name Jacob. I chose that name because it would be different from all the other Jacobs. But I still want to keep a connection to my true name and history. Yaakov is also a bit difficult for Americans to say. I wanted to tell you that when I saw you Saturday, I thought you were really pretty. I really enjoyed our time together that day, and I felt so happy. I never felt this kind of happiness in my life. I am so happy to hear that you were honest with me. I am sorry that I did not call over the weekend. I should have, but I was a bit afraid.
Why?
Amber asked, looking up from the paper. Then she looked down and continued.
Much of my life we have had to move again and again. It scares me to think that something is always going to change. And now that I have you and am happy, I am afraid that if I get too close, something else will change and maybe I will not have you anymore. It is therefore hard to get close, even though I really want to. I like everything about you, but it is scary and I do not know what will happen next. I hope I am not hurting your feelings. Sincerely, Yaakov.
Amber put down the paper and looked up at James, wondering what would make James feel better, or at least change his perspective. Then it came to her. She pulled out her phone and found a picture of her dog, a Boston Terrier.
This is Poncho. I've had him since I was 4, when he was a puppy. I'm 10 now. So I've had this dog for 6 years. Do you know how long a Boston Terrier lives? About 13 to 15 years. So that means I'm about halfway through my dog's life.
This brought down James's mood, to say the least. Amber's voice didn't sound sad, just frank.
If I'm lucky, I'll be saying my last goodbyes to him as I'm going off to college.
She handed the phone to James so he could take a closer look. And after he'd seen a dozen or so pictures, she turned the phone back off. She said,
The day my dog is gone will be a very sad day for me. That's just how it is. But should I have never gotten the dog to avoid the sadness?
James's eyebrows furrowed as he listened, and he shook his head.
Goodbyes are hard, Amber told him, but loneliness is harder. So the way I see it, if you have to move one day, it's better to have good times together first, instead of not.
I think you are right, James said, sighing, but it is difficult to let go of the fear.
Back at the school, detention finally let out. Ted's butt had fallen asleep when the door suddenly opened, and he jumped up, or at least tried to on his wobbly legs.
Veronica!
Ted called out in unison with another voice. It was Diamond, approaching her as she exited the lunchroom. She was wearing a leotard with a sweaty towel draped over her shoulder. Veronica spotted her first and was relieved to see her friend.
I got us a longer break. Hurry up and get changed for the second half, Diamond said.
Can't wait. You won't believe what that dork did in detention earlier.
Again? What did he...
Hey! Ted called out, approaching the two girls.
I waited here for you.
Really?
Both girls asked, crossing their arms. Ted was embarrassed to be talking to Veronica with Diamond right there. It seemed like a personal conversation, but he couldn't change that. Before Ted could say anything more, Veronica said, You waited all this time for me? You basically served detention for nothing. I don't want to talk to you. Get lost. She started to walk off, and Ted tried to follow, but Diamond stiff-armed him as Veronica continued down the hallway. You know, Ted, I used to think you weren't so bad. Maybe childish, maybe nerdy, but not bad. She always used to tell me how much of a pig you were, and I just nodded my head thinking you weren't that bad, but that you and her just had beef. But today I see it now. You really are a pig. Ted groaned and said, Diamond, I'm trying to apologize to her. Don't you get it? I waited out here to say sorry and try to fix things. I don't know what you all want me to do. You act like you've never done anything wrong before. Yeah, well, roses are red, violets are blue. It don't always be like that, but sometimes it do. Ted turned around in a fit and stormed out of the school as he said, Just forget it. I'm done. He left the school and activated his jetpack. He took off into the sky, jumping as though his leap would power the jetpack. Really, he was just looking for an outlet for his anger. He zipped through the sky at a breakneck speed, pushing the jetpack to its limits. He, of course, had to stay below the 400-foot limit to avoid aircraft as he took the long way home. After blowing off a bit of steam during his flight, he touched down on his lawn and retracted his jet turbines into his backpack. He stood back and looked at his house. It hadn't hit him since the first week he moved there how beautiful it was. He said to himself, I've got great family, great friends, and now a better life. No use banging my head against this wall, trying to make nice with her. She isn't worth it. When he went inside, he found Derek, Matthew, and Allison on the floor in the living room, doing homework. Matt shot up off the floor to greet Ted with a hug. Normally, he would give Matt a half-hearted hug, but this time, he gave a full embrace, appreciative of his bond with his brother. How did everything go? Derek asked. A giant waste of time. Never again. I'm done trying to appease that girl, Ted said. Sorry to hear that, but if it makes you feel any better, me and you-know-who are in a better place now.
Oh, you mean Diamond? Allison asked.
Who told you?
You. Just now, she said with a sly smirk on her face.
Derek groaned at his boneheaded mistake. He was never going to hear the end of it. He had to get back home as soon as Ted arrived. So he got up, packed up his books, and began to head out the door as his sister pestered him with questions about what he and Diamond talked about. After they were gone, Matt remembered he and Allie were supposed to have a paperball fight, so he asked Ted to substitute for her. Since Mom and Dad weren't home yet, he obliged, especially since he'd likely get into a lot of trouble when they got home. Better to have as much fun as possible before time ran out, he figured.